Reza Pahlavi, we're so appreciative of you joining us again. When we last spoke in June, you noted that the regime you thought was on the brink of collapse. So we've watched Operation Epic Fury unfold, and I'm curious what you have heard from both Iranians in Tehran and Iranians around the world about what's been going on there.
Well, first of all, it's so good to be back with you on the program. I would like to first say that I join millions of my compatriots at home and abroad who thank President Trump for this much-needed intervention that brings us so much closer than ever to final victory and liberation. The situation on the ground is the fact that people obviously were waiting for an opportunity to get back to the streets to take their country back. We see more and more elements of the regime crumbling. A lot of people at home are ready to step in, and this is exactly what will be required for a successful and stable transition.
Well, we know that that's obviously the goal for a lot of people there in the country, and the Ayatollah is dead, but his supporters are actively trying to replace him. His son is actually rumored to be his potential successor. President Trump has called him a lightweight and says the U.S. must be involved in choosing the next leader in Iran. So what insight can you share about this now shattered regime and ultimately what comes next?
I would say, Lara, that the Iranian people are not going to settle for anything that is a remnant of the system in terms of legitimacy. Only a clean break will ensure that not only we achieve a democratic solution and alternative to this regime, but there will be people who are not in any form or shape directly associated with this regime. Most of the people we're talking about, unfortunately, are. That doesn't mean, however, that there are plenty of people in Iran who don't have blood on their hands, who can be part of the transition and the future system. And that's exactly why my plan has included a majority of elements on the ground that can be part of the solution, provided, of course, that they rally with us on the principles that are the element that unifies all of us fighting for a democracy. Iran's territorial integrity, a clean separation of religion from state, equality of all citizens under the law, and most importantly, a democratic process whereby the people can freely choose their future representatives in government. The transition involves leaving the people of Iran with that choice, and only the ballot box should determine the outcome and who would be in the future responsible for our country. I think what we will expect any government, including, of course, the current Trump administration, to recognize that indeed the best way to help the Iranian people is to allow them to make that choice freely and to support that choice as a Western democracy, as the leading democracy in the world.
So let me have you expand on that, because President Trump says that the next leader of Iran needs to be, of course, fair and just, but that a democracy is not the only path forward. Obviously, you've just noted that you, and I think we've heard you say many times, you would like to lead Iran's transition towards a free and fair election, as you just expanded on. So is a democratic government really the ultimate goal here, or do you actually see potential other options on the table?
I don't think, as an Iranian Democrat, and millions of Iranians agree with me on that, that we will settle for anything less than a democratic outcome. In the same way that today's free world democracies are in fact based on the very principles that guarantees people equality under the law and sovereignty, and only free elections, and the ballot box should determine whoever would have a role to play. I don't see any formula outside democracy that will be lasting, tenable, or acceptable. The only way that people will accept the outcome is to make sure that they are in charge of their own destiny. And I don't think there's any other way than a democratic system that can guarantee that. That's a recipe for stability, long-term progress, a guarantee of protecting all the citizens of all of their rights. I don't think that anything outside of democracy will provide that, and will leave us, instead of stability, a path to potentially chaos and domestic strife and civil war. I'm sure that's not the outcome that we are hoping to have. Therefore, I insist on the fact that democracy is our goal, and I think Iranians are quite capable of managing their own affairs. They have to be given that opportunity.
Well, it sounds like that is the consensus of most people there in the country based on what we've seen and what we've heard. Now, you said that Khamenei's death was an earth-shattering event for Iran. How do you anticipate the fall of this regime will impact its proxies in the region? Because we know how active they have been there, and we know how much destruction and terror we've seen come from them. And ultimately, how can this help propel peace overall in the Middle East?
Well, again, to my previous point, in the democratic Iran, the immediate ramification of that means that unlike a regime that has fomented terrorism, supported proxies, have been a threat to the region, have pursued a very opaque and nuclear plan, all of this disappears in one shot. That's the benefit of making sure that a free Iran will guarantee, as a result, that all the problems that have been associated with this regime from its inception will disappear together with this regime, total disappearance. As a democracy, Iranians will be committed to establish an element of cordial relationship with our neighbors, bring peace to the area, bring an element of stability, which ultimately is conducive to development, prosperity, something that will be good for us, but it will also be good for our partners. I think America has a lot to gain as a result. And don't forget that after the dust settles and we achieve that future, then Iran is open for economic opportunities. Just on one aspect, I can tell you that the Iranian market that has been closed to America for almost half a century is the only remaining untapped economic opportunity. Could mean probably in the first 10 to 15 years over $1 trillion worth of revenue to the U.S. economy. Not to mention the fact that many Iranians or Americans or others who want to invest into Iran will immediately bring an economic impact that at the end of the day, long beyond human rights and democracy and freedom, actually puts food on the table, create employments, new jobs, all infrastructures that Iran need to bring back on par. And that's an opportunity that will drive, in a mutual way, a win-win scenario for both my compatriots as well as America, of course, and many countries that would like to consider Iran as their true partners in that future.
Well, we certainly like the sound of that. Now, we had President Trump calling on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms and accept the immunity that he's offering. Take a listen to this.
And I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military and the police, to lay down their arms. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country. We'll give you immunity, and we'll be giving you really the right side of history, because that's what it is. So you'll be perfectly safe with total immunity, or you'll face absolutely guaranteed death.
So, Prince Pahlavi, when and if a government transition begins, do you believe that those who do accept that immunity or others may try to stand in the way of progress?
Let me stress the importance of why we say, and I say, that except for those people who have been criminally implicated with this regime and have the blood of the Iranian people on their hand, there are many elements within the military, police forces, security forces, as well as the civil bureaucracy that can survive regime change and be part of the solution. That's the quickest way to ensure a stable transition. They have to be part of the solution as opposed to remain part of the problem. As a matter of fact, my own messaging, both to the military or security forces, as well as the civil bureaucracy, is the fact that they can see a future for themselves. We're not talking about de-Baathification like in Iraq. We're talking about a totally different scenario of change. I think this is something that should be acceptable to the American administration. And I think this is most importantly what is acceptable to the people of Iran. I think our Iranian the elements inside will only trust a scenario whereby they are not only guaranteed their survival, provided that they are not criminally implicated, but will be part of the solution, and they will accept that as a true scenario of reconciliation, national unity. And I think that goes hand in glove with, if that's the end game that we are looking for, whether it is from our prism or the prism you have right now under President Trump's administration.
Well, Prince Reza Pahlavi, we are so appreciative of you taking some more time to break it all down for us. We're praying for the best outcome there for your people in Iran, and we are certainly all going to be continuing to watch all of this unfold. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lara.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.